The ruins of Godric's Hollow were still warm when Bellatrix Lestrange arrived. Not because she had sensed the Dark Lord's fall. No one had. Not because a mark had faded and screamed warning through her blood. Hers burned as bright as ever. But because Bellatrix was the kind of creature who lived in the margins of war, in rumors, in the gaps between orders, in the silence that followed catastrophe. When the world shook, she ran toward the tremor, laughing, hungry to be first. She expected to find proof of victory. Instead, she found a house torn open like a throat. The village around it was wrong in the way only magic could make something wrong. The air tasted like shattered charms, like protective wards torn out by the roots. Even the night felt thin, as if the world had been punctured and was slowly leaking whatever made it safe. Bellatrix moved through the hedgerows and shadowed lanes with the ease of a woman who'd spent her entire life learning how to be unseen. Her cloak drank moonlight. Her hair was bound back, wand already in her hand, fingers curled around it like it was the only truth left. She heard voices before she saw the road. Auras, not many yet. Just the first wave, the ones fast enough to respond to an emergency signal and foolish enough to arrive without understanding what they were walking into. Bellatrix watched from the darkness as they gathered near the Potter cottage's front gate, wands up, shoulders tense, eyes darting. Could be a trap. Dumbledore said, Merlin's sake, it's Potter's place. Bellatrix felt her mouth twist into a smile at the name. Potter, James Potter. The golden boy, the arrogant Gryffindor, the one who laughed too loudly and lived like he believed the world owed him breath. Bellatrix had always wanted to see that laugh die. She hadn't expected to see the entire world die with it. She slipped past the auras using an old family glamour, something the Blacks had used long before the Ministry had even existed. It didn't make her invisible. It made her unimportant, a shadow that the mind refused to hold on to. A passing shape the eyes forgot the second it moved. She stepped onto the path and approached the front door, which wasn't a door anymore. It hung in broken pieces, splintered as if something had hit it from the inside, and then decided wood wasn't worth the effort. Inside, the house was open to the sky. The living room ceiling was gone. The staircase was cracked. The walls were scored with blackened lines, like claws had raked through them. Every surface hummed with residual power, and Bellatrix felt it crawl up her skin, hungry and confused. There was a smell in the air that made her nostrils flare. Blood, smoke, old magic. She stepped over rubble and saw him. James Potter lay in the hallway, twisted at an angle that suggested he'd died too fast to even understand he was dying. His eyes were open, unfocused, as if still looking for a joke that wasn't there. One hand stretched toward the place where his wand should have been. Bellatrix stared at him for a long moment. She expected to feel triumph. She felt cheated. Not because James Potter didn't deserve it. He did. But because there was no artistry in the death, no fear on his face, no drawn-out pleading, just an abrupt ending, as careless as a snapped twig. Bellatrix clicked her tongue. What a waste, she whispered. Her gaze drifted upward, toward the staircase. Something in the air pulled her that way. A faint pressure behind the eyes, like the world itself, was pointing her toward the true heart of the catastrophe. She moved upstairs, careful, stepping around broken beams and scorched fragments of what might have once been family photographs. A child's toy lay half-melted, its painted smile warped into something grotesque. Bellatrix's boots made no sound, yet she could hear her own breathing. The silence was too large. It pressed against her ears until every creak of wood felt like a scream. Then she saw Lily Potter. She lay near the nursery, collapsed like she'd thrown herself between the doorway and something else. Her red hair spread out across the floor, like spilled ink. Her eyes were closed, face strangely calm, for someone who'd been killed by the most feared curse in the world. Bellatrix stared at her with a sudden, sharp interest. Lily Potter was Muggle-born, a mudblood, a girl the world said should have been weak, disposable, nothing. And yet, even in death, the air around her felt thick, charged, like she'd written her last breath into the bones of the house, and the house was still obeying. Bellatrix slowly stepped closer, her wand angled down but ready. The nursery door was half off its hinges. A faint glow leaked from the crack. Bellatrix's heart beat once. Hard. She pushed the door open. The nursery was intact, not untouched, but held together, as if the rest of the house had been blown apart by a storm, and this room had been sheltered by a hand placed over it. The cot stood near the window. The moonlight fell across a tiny shape wrapped in blankets. A baby, alive. Harry Potter didn't cry. He stared at her. That was what stopped her. Not the prophecy. Not the politics. Not even the idea that this child was the Dark Lord's failure made flesh. It was the look in his eyes. Green, luminous, steady. Like he recognized her. Like he dared her. Bellatrix had seen fearless children before. Pure-blood heirs who had been taught their family names were armor. But this was different. This was a baby who had survived the killing curse. A baby who had ended the war in a single breath. Bellatrix felt something coil in her chest. Something like awe, sharpened into obsession. She stepped closer. The protective magic around the cot hummed. Not hostile, but firm. It wasn't a shield, like an aurore's. It was older, softer, worse. The kind of magic that wasn't cast with a wand, but with a soul. Bellatrix smiled slowly, the expression almost reverent. "Oh, darling," she whispered. "What did she make you?" The scar on his forehead was raw, a mark like a sigil. Bellatrix lifted her hand, as if she could touch it, taste it, learn its shape. The air snapped. A force struck her fingers like teeth, not sharp enough to draw blood, but sharp enough to warn. Bellatrix hissed and withdrew. Her eyes narrowed. "So," she murmured, "a mother's protection." Harry blinked once, slow. "Not afraid." Bellatrix laughed softly, because she couldn't help it. Something about his stillness amused her in a way that felt almost intimate. "You're not like them," she told him, leaning over the cot. "You're not like your father. You're not even like your mother." The baby's gaze didn't break. Bellatrix felt an impulse then. An impulse so strange it made her pause. To pick him up. Not to kill him, not to curse him, but to hold him. The thought should have been disgusting. Instead, it felt inevitable. Outside, the auras were closer now. Bellatrix could hear them in the house below. Boots crunching on debris, voices tense with fear, one voice shouting orders, another sounding sick. She had minutes. She couldn't take her time. She couldn't examine the room forever. She couldn't linger in the aftermath like a poet. Bellatrix looked at Lily's body again, then back at the child. The Dark Lord was gone. Her lord. Her purpose. The one thing she had built her madness around. The Death Eaters would fracture. Some would run, some would beg, some would pretend they'd never served him. Bellatrix knew herself too well to pretend. She also knew something else. Power never vanished. It moved. And this child, this impossible child, was a door. If she owned the door, she owned whatever came through it. Bellatrix bent and lifted the baby from the cot. The protective magic flared. For a moment it felt like hands pushing back, like Lily Potter's dying will had risen into the air and tried to snatch her child away from the monster that was holding him. Bellatrix gritted her teeth. "Don't you dare," she whispered at the air itself. Harry's small body was warm, heavier than she expected, and he smelled like milk and smoke. His fingers curled around her sleeve with startling strength. Bellatrix froze again. He was holding on to her, not reaching for safety. Reaching, as if he'd made a decision. The ward struck her again, a crack of pain that ran up her arm. Bellatrix's eyes flashed. She wasn't foolish enough to try to break Lily's protection head-on. Even she respected ancient magic when it was angry. So she did something else, something the Blacks had done for centuries when they wanted to steal what the world said they had no right to. She changed the definition. Bellatrix pressed her palm to the air above the cot and whispered an incantation in a language older than Latin. The words tasted like iron. The air shuddered, a severing charm, not to destroy the protection completely, but to cut the anchor, to untie the ward's idea of where the child belonged. The magic resisted, then shifted, confused, trying to understand whether home was still this room, this house, this tragedy. Bellatrix smiled, sharp as a knife. Good, she murmured. Confuse it. That's how you win. Harry's scar pulsed once, hot beneath the glamourless air. Bellatrix felt it like a heartbeat. And for the first time since the war began, something in her chest moved that wasn't devotion or rage. Curiosity. What exactly had happened here? How had the Dark Lord, Voldemort, failed? She didn't have time to answer. The auras were on the stairs. Bellatrix tightened her hold on Harry and swept her cloak around them both. It swallowed the moonlight. It swallowed the nursery's quiet. She disapparated a heartbeat before the first aurora burst into the doorway. For 3 days, the wizarding world screamed questions. Where was Harry Potter? Dumbledore raged quietly behind closed doors. The ministry panicked publicly. Hagrid was sent to fetch the boy and returned with only ash and absence. The Daily Prophet printed headlines that grew more hysterical with every hour. Some claimed the boy who lived had vanished into the smoke like a blessing taken back. Others whispered that Death Eaters had stolen him, that the war wasn't over, that it had only changed shape. No one suspected Bellatrix, because Bellatrix Lestrange didn't steal children. Bellatrix Lestrange murdered families. And yet, deep in a manor that no longer flew the dark mark above its gates, Bellatrix rocked Harry Potter through the night. She didn't know how to be soft. She didn't sing lullabies. She paced with him like a predator guarding a prize. She spoke to him as if he were already grown, already dangerous. You took him from me, she told the sleeping baby, eyes bright with fevered devotion. You took my lord, so I will take you. But as the days passed, something strange happened. Harry began to respond to her, not with love. He was too small for that. Not with fear. He didn't know enough to fear her, but with attention, with stillness, with that steady stare that felt like a challenge. Bellatrix started talking more. She told him stories of the old families, of bloodlines and betrayals, of the noble house of Black. She told him the world was cruel, that affection was leverage, that power was the only safety. She told him the Dark Lord had been the future, and that the future had been stolen. And she told him, always, that he would never be powerless. Harry's first accidental magic came at 6 months old. Bellatrix was holding him by the fireplace, the manor quiet around them, when an owl slammed into the window and dropped a ministry notice that shimmered with tracking enchantments. The parchment didn't just land, it clung, trying to latch onto the wards, trying to taste the air, trying to report back. Bellatrix's wand snapped up instantly. Her smile was razor-thin. Found us, she purred. The notice unfolded itself mid-air and read in official ink, by order of the Ministry of Magic, all suspected Death Eater properties are subject to search and seizure. Bellatrix laughed, and the sound was bright. Sharp, unhinged. Then Harry reached out with his tiny hand and clenched his fist. The parchment burst into green flame. The tracking enchantment screamed and dissolved like insects crushed underfoot. The owl fell from the windowsill, stunned, feathers smoking. Bellatrix froze. Then, slowly, she looked down at the baby. Harry stared back. Bellatrix's face softened into something terrifyingly tender. "Oh," she whispered. "Oh, you really are his end." From that night forward, she stopped seeing Harry as a stolen trophy. She started seeing him as an heir to the war itself, and she began to raise him accordingly. Patiently, obsessively, as if every breath he took was an oath, because if the world had created a weapon by trying to kill a child, Bellatrix Lestrange would make sure the weapon belonged to her. Bellatrix Lestrange did not raise Harry Potter like a mother. She raised him like a secret. And secrets, in Bellatrix's world, were either weapons or liabilities. There was no third category. For the first year, she kept him hidden in a place that wasn't on any map the Ministry trusted. Not Malfoy Manor, not Lestrange Holdings, not even Grimmauld Place. Not yet. She chose a hunting lodge buried in the folds of old black land, warded so heavily that the air itself forgot it existed. It sat in the middle of a forest that had once been sacred, long before wizards called anything sacred, and the trees around it were twisted in a way that made even centaurs avoid the place. The wards were not pretty. They weren't the polite sort of protection the Ministry approved. They were hungry. Anything that approached with hostile intent found the path shifting underfoot. An auror could walk for hours in a circle and never notice. An owl with an enchanted message would drop dead in mid-flight, heart stilled by a curse older than the statute of secrecy. A curious muggle would look toward the trees and suddenly remember an urgent appointment somewhere else. Bellatrix slept lightly, wand under her pillow, Harry in a cot by her bed. When he cried, she didn't sing. She paced. When he laughed, which he did sometimes, unexpectedly, she stopped pacing and stared at him like he'd performed a complex spell. Harry's laughter was quiet, rare, but when it came, it sounded like the beginning of something. Bellatrix didn't know what to do with beginnings, so she turned it into discipline. His first words were not Mama or Dada. Bellatrix refused such small, soft sounds. She corrected his babbling with obsessive intensity until his tongue shaped what she wanted, until language itself became a weapon, precise and purposeful. "Say it," she demanded one night, holding him upright, face close to his. Harry's eyes were half-lidded with sleep. His tiny hands clutched her sleeves. "Buh," he mumbled. Bellatrix's smile tightened. Again. "Blah. Blood," she snapped, as if the word could be carved into him by force alone. Harry stared at her. Then, slowly, he shaped it. Blue. Bellatrix inhaled like someone had pressed a needle into her chest. Not pain, something stranger. Satisfaction sharp enough to be dangerous. "Yes," she whispered. "Blood." By two, Harry could say his name. Harry. Not boy. Not baby. Not it. Harry. Bellatrix did not call him son. She did not call him mine. Not aloud. The portraits would have heard. The magic in the walls would have remembered. Even loyal houses could become witnesses if the wrong person learned how to interrogate them. But she called him other things. My little serpent, when he was clever. My victory, when the world failed to find him. My revenge, when she read the prophet and saw Dumbledore's careful lies printed as comfort. And sometimes, rare, dangerous, almost honest, when she thought nothing was listening, and the fire burned low, and Harry slept with his fist tucked against her ribs, like he'd claimed the right to be there. My salvation. Harry grew up inside old magic. Not schoolbook magic. not polite spells and tidy incantations. The kind of magic that lived in family rings and blood oaths. The kind that didn't care about morality, only intention. Bellatrix brought him toys, but not the sort other children had. She brought him objects that taught lessons. A silver knife that cut rope cleanly and could slice through hexed bindings if held correctly. A music box that played only when the room was empty, teaching him to notice when he was being watched. A goblin-forged coin that always returned to his pocket, no matter how far he threw it, teaching him that some things, loyalty, debt, ownership, could be spelled into existence. When he asked why there were no other children, Bellatrix's answer was simple. Children are loud, she said, eyes bright with amusement, and loud things get killed. Harry absorbed that, like he absorbed everything. Quiet became his habit. Stillness became his armor. He learned early that Bellatrix's moods were weather. Some days she was incandescent, pacing the lodge like a storm given human form. Some days she was calm in a way that made him uneasy, smiling softly at nothing as if she'd heard a joke no one else could understand. On those calm days, she talked more. Not about nursery rhymes, about history. The noble and most ancient house of Black, she would murmur, tracing a finger across the air, as if the tapestry was hanging there. We were kings before the ministry existed. We were power before the world knew how to name it. Harry would sit on the rug, Nyx, a snake she later allowed him, coiled around his wrist like jewelry, listening with an intensity that felt too old for his small body. Why were you kings? He asked once, head tilted. Bellatrix smiled. Because we took what we wanted and dared anyone to try and take it back. At 3, Harry watched Bellatrix duel a man in the forest. He wasn't supposed to. Bellatrix had told him to stay inside. She'd placed a locking charm on the lodge door, a soft, casual spell that assumed obedience. Harry had sat by the window anyway, pressing his forehead to the glass, watching the trees. He didn't know what he was waiting for, but he felt it, like a shift in the air, like the forest holding its breath. Then a figure appeared between the trunks, moving too carefully for an animal. A wizard, cloaked, masked. Bellatrix stepped out onto the porch like she'd been expecting him. Wrong turn, she called, voice light. The man raised his wand. Bellatrix laughed. The duel was not a fair one. It was not even a duel, really. It was a performance. Bellatrix turning violence into art the way some people turned music into comfort. Spells flashed, purple, green, white hot. The trees shuddered as curses cut bark. The air screamed when a cutting hex missed by inches. Harry watched, heart steady. He didn't cry. He didn't flinch. He studied. He watched how Bellatrix moved, how she never planted her feet too long, how she smiled when the man hesitated, how she struck not where he was, but where he would be. When it ended, the man was on his knees, wand gone, mask cracked. Bellatrix tilted her head, considering him like a broken toy. "You're not ministry," she said softly. "Ministry men smell like paperwork." "Who sent you?" The man choked, eyes wild. Bellatrix's smile sharpened. "Answer." He didn't. Bellatrix's wand flicked. The man collapsed, silent. Harry blinked slowly. Bellatrix turned and saw him at the window. For a moment, something passed through her expression. Surprise, irritation, then approval. She stepped inside. "You disobeyed," she said. Harry held her gaze. "I wanted to see." Bellatrix stared, then laughed once, short, delighted. "Yes," she said, kneeling to his height. "Good. See everything. If you don't see it, it can kill you." Harry looked past her shoulder, toward the forest. Who was he? He asked. Bellatrix's eyes glinted. Someone who thought he could take what belongs to me. Harry didn't ask if Bellatrix would kill more people. He asked the only question that mattered. Will they come again? Bellatrix's grin was feral. Oh, yes, she whispered. And when they do, you'll learn. By 4, Harry understood that the world wanted him, not to save him, to use him. The Ministry wanted their symbol back. Dumbledore wanted his prophecy on legs. The remnants of the Death Eaters wanted either a banner or a bargaining chip. Families that had played both sides wanted leverage. People who'd lost loved ones wanted revenge and didn't care if the target was a child. Bellatrix wanted none of them to have him, so she began to build his mind like a fortress. She introduced him to occlumency before she taught him to properly write. Close your eyes, she ordered, sitting across from him at the table. Harry did. Think of something you want, Bellatrix said, voice low. Harry frowned. I don't know. Bellatrix's gaze sharpened, anger flickering, an anger not at him, but at the world that had robbed him of simple wanting. So she gave him something to want, a snake, small and sleek, black-green like ink on glass. It slid across his palms without fear. This, Bellatrix said, understands the world. It knows hunger. It knows patience. It knows when to strike. Harry watched the snake's tongue flick. What's its name? Bellatrix asked. Harry hesitated, then whispered, Nyx. Bellatrix's smile softened, pleased. Good. Now imagine someone trying to take Nyx away. Harry's fingers tightened. His chest burned. Feel that, Bellatrix murmured. That's the opening. That's where they get in. Now, lock it. Harry swallowed, eyes squeezed shut, and imagined a door in his mind. A heavy door. Iron, black. He pushed the feeling behind it. For a moment, it worked. Bellatrix's wand tip pressed lightly to his forehead. Legilimency, gentle as a knife. Harry's eyes snapped open, startled. Bellatrix pulled back, impressed. You felt it, she said. Harry's voice was small but steady. You tried to look. Bellatrix leaned closer, smiled bright and wicked. Yes, and next time, you won't let me. Training wasn't kindness, but it was attention. It was structure. It was Bellatrix giving him the only thing she knew how to give. Power. And in the quiet spaces between lessons, Harry began to piece together the truth about her. Bellatrix did not love him the way stories loved children, not with warmth, not with protection rooted in tenderness. But she needed him. And need, Harry learned, was a kind of bond, a dangerous one. At 5, she took him to Grimmauld Place for the first time, not as home, as inheritance. They arrived by flue, emerging into a hallway lined with dark wood and old portraits that immediately began to whisper. A woman in one frame shrieked, Filth! Bellatrix flicked her wand, and the portrait sealed itself behind a curtain of black cloth. Quiet, she said, almost bored. Harry looked up at the ceiling, at the way the house seemed to lean inward, watching him like a suspicious animal. He smelled dust, old perfume, and something metallic. Blood magic sunk into the foundations. A house like this remembered everything. Bellatrix walked him to the tapestry. The black family tree shimmered there, names woven like fate. Harry stared, eyes scanning. Sirius Black's name was burned out. Andromeda's, too. Bellatrix's fingers traced her own name, proud. Then she moved her hand lower, toward Narcissa. Blood, she whispered, almost reverently. Always blood. Harry's gaze lingered on the empty spaces where names had been scorched away. Why are they gone? He asked. Bellatrix's smile didn't reach her eyes. Because they betrayed us. Because they loved someone, Harry asked, voice curious rather than accusatory. Bellatrix's eyes flashed. Love is weakness. Harry stared at the burned-out holes. Then blood is weak too, he said quietly. If it breaks, silence hit the hallway, like a slap. The house itself seemed to still. Bellatrix looked down at him, eyes bright with something sharp. For a heartbeat, Harry wondered if he'd gone too far. Then Bellatrix laughed, not cruelly, proudly. Yes, she murmured, crouching so they were face to face. Yes, that's it. You see the cracks. Good. A ruler must see where things break. Harry blinked. A ruler? Bellatrix's grin widened. Why else would I keep you alive? That night, Harry slept in a room that had once belonged to a black child long dead. The sheets smelled like cedar and thyme. The curtains were heavy enough to block out the world. He stared at the ceiling and listened to Grimmauld Place whisper through the walls. And for the first time, he felt something close to certainty settle in his bones. He was not being raised to survive. He was being raised to replace something. He didn't yet know what. But the shape of it haunted him. At 6, Harry's accidental magic stopped being childish bursts and started becoming targeted. Bellatrix tested him without telling him she was testing him. She would accidentally leave a knife on the table's edge and watch if he moved it with his hands or his mind. She would mention a name: Dumbledore, Potter, Voldemort, and watch his reaction like a scientist observing a creature she'd bred. Harry learned to control his face. He learned to breathe evenly. He learned to hide. But sometimes, the scar betrayed him. It didn't always hurt. Not yet. Not like it would later. Sometimes it simply pulsed, hot and insistent, when certain objects were near, when certain words were spoken, when Bellatrix's devotion sharpened into something feverish. Bellatrix noticed. Of course she did. You feel things, she said one evening, watching him stare at a locked cabinet. Harry looked away quickly. No. Bellatrix smiled. Slow. Lying is good, she said, but only when you can do it without trembling. Harry's jaw tightened. Bellatrix stepped closer and placed her wand tip against the cabinet's lock. It opened with a soft click. Inside was an old mask, not a Death Eater mask, older, bone white, carved with runes. Harry's scar pulsed. Bellatrix's eyes widened, delighted. Ah, she whispered. There it is. Harry swallowed. What is it? Bellatrix lifted the mask and turned it in her hands like a sacred relic. A door, she said softly. A key, a memory of power. Harry stared at it, unsettled. I don't like it, he said. Bellatrix's gaze snapped to him. Like, she echoed, amused. You don't get to like things, Harry. You get to understand them. Harry's voice sharpened, unexpected defiance rising like a flame. And if I understand it, and I still don't want it, Bellatrix went still. Then she smiled, dangerous, delighted. Then, you'll be stronger than I ever was, she murmured. Because wanting is the weakness. Control is everything. It should have comforted him. It didn't. Because Harry was beginning to understand something else, something Bellatrix didn't mean to teach him. If she believed control was everything, then she would never let him control her. And if she would never let him control her, then he would one day have to take that control by force. At 7, she started wand training. Not with childish sparks, with discipline. She obtained a wand the wrong way. Stolen, bought, traded through shadows. It was not his true wand. It didn't sing for him. It resisted sometimes, like a stubborn animal. Good, Bellatrix said. If you can command a wand that doesn't want you, you can command a world that hates you. Harry practiced in the lodge's basement, where the stone walls absorbed misfired spells. He learned basic hexes, shields, countercurses. He learned that magic listened to intent more than words. He learned to cast without shaking. But the most important lesson Bellatrix drilled into him wasn't a spell. It was a rule. No one owns you, she said, circling him like a teacher circling a student before a duel. Not the Ministry, not Dumbledore, not the Malfoys, not even, her voice dipped, reverent and poisonous, him. Harry's heart stuttered. You mean? Bellatrix's eyes gleamed. The Dark Lord. Harry held her gaze. And you? He asked softly. Bellatrix's smile widened. I own your survival, she said. I own your training. I own the fact that you are alive at all. Harry's fingers tightened around his wand. Bellatrix leaned close, whispering into his ear like a confession. But one day, if you're clever, you'll own yourself. Harry didn't know if she meant it as permission or as a challenge. That winter, the Ministry tried again. Not with a lone assassin, but with a sweep, auras and informants, and detection spells cast over old black lands. Bellatrix felt it coming days before it reached them. The wards twitched. The forest grew restless. Even Nyx hissed more often, tongue flicking like it tasted danger in the air. Bellatrix packed without panic. Harry watched her move through the lodge with the efficiency of someone who had rehearsed betrayal 1,000 times. Where are we going? He asked. Bellatrix didn't look up. Somewhere the world can't imagine. Harry followed her into the fireplace, flue powder ready. But before they stepped in, Harry glanced back at the lodge. It had been his entire world. He felt nothing. That scared him more than any auror. Bellatrix noticed his glance. Don't mourn places, she said, voice sharp. Places are replaceable. Harry nodded. People, too? He asked. Bellatrix's hand paused for half a second. Then she smiled. Especially people. They vanished into green flame. And far away, in the wider wizarding world, Albus Dumbledore stood in his office at Hogwarts, looking at an empty spot on a map where a child should have been. He didn't know where Harry Potter was. He didn't know who had taken him. But he felt the shape of the future shifting, because somewhere out there, the boy who lived was growing up. And he wasn't growing up loved. He was growing up armed. Harry's Hogwarts letter arrived in the only way it could have, like an accusation. The owl didn't land politely on a windowsill. It hit the ward line and fell, feathers puffing out as if the air had slapped it. The bird flapped wildly, disoriented, then crawled the last few inches, like it had forgotten how to be a creature that belonged in the sky. Bellatrix watched from her chair by the fire, chin propped on her knuckles, eyes bright with amusement. Harry stood a few steps away, perfectly still, because Bellatrix had taught him that stillness was power, and reactions were gifts you handed to the enemy. The owl wheezed and dropped a thick envelope on the stone floor. No address, no neat little number, no cheerful flourish, just M.R.H. Potter, and below it, in smaller writing that looked like the quill had hesitated, current location unknown. Harry stared at it. Bellatrix laughed softly. They found you, she said, voice rich with satisfaction. At last. Harry didn't rush to open it. He didn't show excitement. He didn't show fear. That was lesson 1 with Bellatrix. Whatever you feel, hide it first. Then decide if it serves you. He knelt, picked up the envelope, and turned it over in his hands. The paper was thick, charmed against water and fire. The seal bore the Hogwarts crest. The moment his fingers brushed the wax, his scar pulsed. Not pain, not yet. Just a hot awareness, like a needle tapping the inside of his skull. Bellatrix's eyes narrowed slightly, noticing. "You feel it," she murmured. Harry lied smoothly. "No." Bellatrix's smile sharpened. "Better." He broke the seal. The parchment unfolded by itself, as if the letter expected to be obeyed. Asterisk, HOJW, Headmaster Albus Dumbledore. It was standard. Polite. Warm in that fake way institutions wrote to children. Harry read it once, expression blank, then read it again, slower. Not because he didn't understand, but because he was measuring what the letter didn't say. It didn't say, "We're sorry." It didn't say, "We were looking." It didn't say, "You were stolen." It assumed he'd been somewhere safe and normal, like a boy who had lived in a cupboard. Bellatrix watched him like a predator watching a younger predator grow teeth. "Do you want to go?" she asked, too casually. Harry looked up. "You want me to," he said, because Bellatrix loved truth delivered like obedience. Bellatrix's grin widened. "Yes, I do." Because Hogwarts wasn't just a school. It was the center of the board. It was where old families measured each other, where alliances formed, where reputations were built like castles. It was where Dumbledore's gaze watched everything with soft, gentle lies. Bellatrix needed Harry inside it, not as a rescued child, as a planted knife. So she prepared him like she was sending him to war. Over the next weeks, their training became tighter, colder, more focused. Occlumency drills doubled. Bellatrix pressed harder, forcing him to build thicker walls, sharper doors, deeper locks. She tested him with sudden legilimency strikes during breakfast, during a walk, even while he was reading, trying to catch him off guard. Harry learned to never be off guard. She made him recite family lines like prayers. Black, Lestrange, Malfoy, Parkinson. Not Greengrass, Zabini. Know them, Bellatrix said, because names are currencies. Debts are hidden in syllables. She taught him manners like weapons, how to be polite without being weak, how to smile without offering warmth, how to speak softly and still cut. Then she gave him his most important mask. Not a literal one, though she had plenty of those, but a story. "You will not enter Hogwarts as Harry Potter," Bellatrix told him one night, pacing in front of the fireplace. "Not yet." Harry's eyes narrowed. "Why?" "Because Harry Potter belongs to the world," she said, "and the world will try to take what it thinks it owns." Harry held her gaze. "So what am I?" Bellatrix crouched, close enough that Harry could smell smoke and old perfume. "You are mine," she whispered, and for a heartbeat the words sounded like honesty. Then her smile returned, sharp and strategic. "And you are a black." She laid out the plan like a ritual, a glamour charm for his scar, woven into a thin chain he would wear under his shirt. The charm wasn't perfect. Bellatrix didn't want it perfect. Perfect things drew attention. Imperfect things passed as normal. A new wardrobe, robes tailored in old pureblood style, subtle and expensive in a way that didn't scream wealth, but whispered it. A false surname, asterisk, black. Not Lestrange. Too dangerous, too obvious, too hunted. Not Potter. Too explosive, too famous, too loud. Black gave him protection and mystery. Black gave him a history, and black gave Bellatrix a thrill, because it was her bloodline, her pride, her claim. "You will be Harry Black," she said. A distant relation, an heir no one knew existed. A boy raised abroad. Harry nodded. And if someone recognizes me? Bellatrix's eyes gleamed. Then you smile, she whispered, and you let them wonder if they're losing their mind. Harry's mouth curved faintly. And if Dumbledore tries to pull me into his office? Bellatrix's grin widened, delighted by the question. Then you let him try, she purred. And you lie so well he believes he taught you honesty. On September 1st, the world felt too open. Harry had lived his entire life inside wards, inside controlled spaces, inside Bellatrix's chosen cages. King's Cross was a chaos of movement, voices, muggle noise, unregulated, unarmed, unaware. It was disgusting. And yet, it was also fascinating, not because it was warm or comforting, but because it was proof of something Bellatrix always claimed didn't exist. A world that kept moving even when wizards stopped breathing. Harry watched people hurry past with suitcases and coffee, and lives that didn't revolve around bloodlines and wars. It didn't soften him, but it did make him curious in a cold, careful way. Bellatrix did not walk him to the barrier like a normal guardian. She didn't dare. Instead, she met him in a shadowed alley nearby, hidden beneath a layered glamour that made her look like an older witch with dull hair and tired eyes. Her magic held, but Harry could still see the truth beneath it, the coil of madness in her posture, the dangerous brightness behind her gaze. She adjusted his collar, fingers brisk, almost tender. You remember the rule, she said. Harry nodded. They will try to love me. Bellatrix's smile was sharp. And what is love? Harry replied without hesitation. A leash. Bellatrix leaned closer, whispering into his ear like a spell. Let them try to leash you, she murmured. Then hold the chain. Harry met her eyes. And you? He asked softly. Will you try to leash me too? Bellatrix paused. For a heartbeat, the alley felt too quiet. Then Bellatrix laughed, bright and feral. I already did, she said. Now go. Harry turned away without flinching. He walked towards the barrier with a steady pace, trunk rolling behind him. He didn't look back. Because Bellatrix had taught him another rule, too. Never show anyone what you're leaving behind. Platform 9 3/4 was loud with magic and childhood and anticipation. Red steam, owls shrieking, parents hugging too tightly, friends calling names like the world was safe enough to be simple. Harry moved through it like a shadow with purpose. He felt eyes on him immediately. Not recognition, but instinct. Pureblood families noticed other pureblood-coded children. They noticed tailoring, posture, quiet. He didn't act like a first year. He acted like someone who had been trained to survive a war. That was when Draco Malfoy saw him. Draco was flanked by Crabbe and Goyle, his pale hair perfect, his expression already sharpened into the arrogance of a boy raised to believe his name was armor. He was scanning the crowd like he expected it to bow. Then his gaze snagged on Harry, not because Draco knew him, because Harry looked like he belonged. Draco approached, with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. You're new, Draco said, voice smooth. Malfoy. Draco Malfoy. Harry looked at the offered hand for half a second, long enough to make Draco wonder if he'd misjudged him. Then Harry took it. His grip wasn't crushing. It didn't need to be. It was firm, steady, controlled. Territory without theatrics. Harry, he said. Harry Black. Draco's eyes widened slightly, hunger sharpening. A Black, Draco echoed. Your family? Harry's mouth curved faintly. Something like that. Draco's smile returned, a little too eager. Then You'll want the right company. Probably, Harry said mildly, which meant nothing and sounded agreeable. On the train, Draco claimed a compartment like he owned it, and invited Harry inside like it was a favor. Pansy Parkinson followed, sharp-eyed and already cruel. Blaise Zabini arrived later, elegant and silent, watching everything with the calm suspicion of someone who didn't trust smiles. Harry sat by the window, not because he wanted to look outside, but because it gave him angles, a view of the corridor, a reflection in the glass. Awareness. Draco talked. He talked about Hogwarts, about Slytherin, about blood purity, about how certain families mattered and certain families didn't. He mentioned Dumbledore with contempt, which was expected. He mentioned the Weasleys with disgust, which was predictable. Harry listened. He didn't react. He didn't agree too loudly. He didn't disagree. He asked questions that sounded harmless. Which professors favor which houses? Harry asked casual. Draco shrugged. Snape favors us. McGonagall favors Gryffindor. Flitwick's for Ravenclaw. Sprouts for Hufflepuff. Dumbledore? Harry asked. Draco rolled his eyes. Favors himself. Blaise watched Harry, head tilted. You talk like an adult, Blaise said quietly. Harry looked at him. Adults talk like children, he replied. They just hide it better. Pansy laughed sharp. I like him. Harry didn't. But liking didn't matter. Control mattered. At the feast, the great hall was exactly what Bellatrix had described, a beautiful trap. Candlelight floating above like stars. Food that appeared like an illusion meant to soften children into thinking power could be generous. Teachers seated like judges, and at the center, Albus Dumbledore. Harry felt Dumbledore's gaze touch him like sunlight on skin. Not warm, investigative. Harry lowered his eyes politely and built his occlumency walls higher. The sorting began. Names called, children walking, houses cheering. When Harry Black echoed through the hall, there was a murmur. Not loud, not shocked. Interested, Harry walked forward with a controlled stride and sat on the stool. The sorting hat dropped onto his head. The world narrowed into darkness and fabric and breath. Then the hat spoke in his mind. Ah, so you're here. Harry's heartbeat stayed steady. He didn't answer aloud. He answered with thought, as Bellatrix had taught him. I'm where I need to be. The hat sifted. It moved through memories like fingers through pages. A warded lodge, a woman laughing beside a fireplace, a dead wizard in the forest, a snake curling around a child's wrist, a boy learning to lock grief behind doors. The hat paused, almost wary. You are dangerous. Harry's thought was calm. I was raised to be. The hat's tone shifted. Faint amusement. Bravery, yes, but not for glory. Intelligence, yes, but not for praise. Ambition. Harry's mind sharpened. Put me where I can win. The hat chuckled in the darkness. And there, deeper, it found something else, a hunger that wasn't quite his, a pulse behind his scar like a second heartbeat. The hat went very still. Oh. Harry's scar warmed beneath the glamour chain. The hat's voice became quieter. There are shadows in you, child, not born from you, planted. Harry's thought was colder. Then I'll make them useful. The hat hesitated, then decided. Slytherin. The word hit the great hall like a blade thrown into wood. Slytherin erupted in cheers. Draco slapped the table, grinning. Pansy looked pleased. Blaise's expression didn't change, but his eyes sharpened. Up at the staff table, Snape went still, not startled, frozen, as if he'd seen a ghost wear a child's face. Dumbledore's gaze narrowed behind his half-moon glasses, smile gentle, but eyes calculating. Harry walked to the Slytherin table and sat like he'd always belonged there. Draco leaned in immediately. "I knew it," he whispered, smug. "Blacks always end up where they belong." Harry's eyes flicked across the hall, taking in faces like a map. "We'll see," he murmured. That first week in Slytherin was a quiet war. It wasn't spells in corridors or fists in classrooms. It was glances. Seating arrangements, invitations, who shared notes, who shared secrets, who tested him, trying to see if Harry Black was real or just a rumor stitched into robes. Draco tried to claim him as an ally. Pansy tried to claim him as an accessory. Older Slytherins tried to measure him. Not Greengrass, a few sixth years who looked at him like prey that might bite back. Harry let them circle. He let them believe they had time. In potions, Snape's attention hit him like a curse. Snape didn't shout like he did at other students. He didn't sneer theatrically. He watched. And that was worse. "You are precise," Snape said on the second lesson, voice flat. "Where did you learn to measure without trembling?" Harry didn't look away. "At home." Snape's eyes narrowed. "Which home is that, Mr. Black?" Harry's smile was small and controlled. "The one you can't enter." A flicker, anger, shock, something like pain, crossed Snape's face before it was swallowed again. The room went quiet. Then Snape turned away, as if Harry weren't worth the effort. But Harry felt it. Snape cared. And caring meant leverage. In the evenings, Harry explored the castle alone. Not because he was lonely. Harry didn't think in those terms. But because castles always had secrets, and secrets always had power. He mapped corridors in his mind, noted shifting staircases, listened for echoes. He watched the paintings gossip, and learned which ones lied. He learned the castle's moods, the way Bellatrix had taught him to read weather. And on the fifth night, he found the first real crack in the world's control. A suit of armor moved when he passed, not because it was enchanted to attack, but because something behind it shifted. A draft. A hidden door. Harry pressed his palm against the wall, felt a seam. His scar pulsed once. Hot. He stepped back and stared. This wasn't random. This was the castle responding to him, as if it recognized the thing inside him. He didn't open the passage that night. He didn't rush. He went back to his dorm and sat on his bed, staring at his hands. Nyx coiled around his wrist, her scales cool against his skin. The other boys talked and laughed, already forming friendships. Harry didn't join them. He listened, and behind his calm expression, his mind moved like a knife sharpening itself. Because Hogwarts was bigger than he expected. It wasn't just a school. It was a living organism full of history and power and buried wars. And somewhere inside it, Harry could feel the shape of destiny like a pressure behind the eyes. Not the destiny Dumbledore believed in. Not the destiny the prophet printed. Something older. Something dark. Something that felt like a door waiting to be opened. That night, he opened his trunk and found a letter tucked beneath his folded robes. No owl had delivered it. No teacher had handed it over. It was sealed with black wax, a serpent pressed into the seal. Harry's fingers went cold. He broke it open. Only one sentence, written in Bellatrix's sharp, elegant hand. Asterisk, remember, they will try to love you. Let them. Love is a leash. Harry stared at the words for a long time. Then he folded the parchment carefully, held it over his palm, and burned it to ash with a silent charm. No one noticed. No one understood what they were watching. And Harry lay back on his bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the distance between him and Bellatrix like a new kind of air. For the first time in his life, she wasn't right beside him. And instead of relief, Harry felt something else. Possibility. Dangerous possibility. Because in a place full of people trying to shape him, Slytherins trying to claim him, professors trying to read him, Dumbledore trying to place him, Harry realized a truth that made his mouth curve into a faint, private smile. He could become anything here, and no one would see it coming until it was too late. The stone, the snake, and the first time Harry lies to a headmaster. The first thing Harry learned at Hogwarts was that most people mistook politeness for truth. They smiled at him as if smiles were harmless. They asked questions as if questions were innocent. They offered kindness as if kindness didn't come with hooks. He watched them do it to other students too, the way adults did it to children everywhere. And he understood something Bellatrix had implied but never stated plainly. Adults were just children with better masks. McGonagall watched him with an intensity that didn't feel like suspicion so much as recognition gone wrong. She would pause when he entered a room, her gaze snagging on him as if she was about to say a name she couldn't quite remember. Once, in the corridor outside Transfiguration, she stared at his face, so long a second-year Hufflepuff bumped into her, and apologized twice. Harry apologized, too, because that was what you did when you wanted a person to underestimate you. Flitwick liked him immediately, praising his control with genuine warmth. Sprout offered him a handful of peppermint leaves after his first herbology lesson, and told him they helped with focus. Even Hagrid tried booming friendliness like a shield. Harry accepted every gesture politely. Then he stored it away as information. Only Snape refused to pretend. Snape looked at him like a man being forced to swallow something sharp. The first potions lesson set the tone. Snape didn't scream at him the way he screamed at Gryffindors. He didn't sneer in the theatrical way that made children flinch and other teachers sigh. He simply watched Harry with a cold, precise focus that felt like a blade held at the throat. "You are precise," Snape said, after Harry completed a potion without a single wasted movement. "Where did you learn to measure like that?" Harry didn't hesitate. "At home." Snape's mouth tightened. "Which home is that, Mr. Black?" Harry met his gaze, calm, steady, and lied without tension. "The one you can't enter." A flicker passed across Snape's face, too quick for anyone else to notice. Something that might have been anger, something that might have been pain. Snape turned away, but Harry had felt it. Snape cared, not in a gentle way, in a dangerous way. Harry filed that away too. In Slytherin House, the attention was different. It didn't come wrapped in warmth or concern. It came wrapped in assessment. Draco Malfoy wanted him as an ally, the way a prince wanted another prince beside him on a throne. Pansy wanted him as a trophy, a rumor she could drape around herself. Older Slytherins wanted to see what he was made of. The first test came from a fifth year, with a sharp jaw and a family ring that glittered with money. He stopped Harry outside the common room one evening, blocking the entrance with a lazy stance that pretended it wasn't a threat. "Black," the older boy said, voice amused. "Which branch?" Harry paused, as if considering. He could have invented a story. Bellatrix had taught him enough names to fill a book, but invention left traces if you didn't do it cleanly. So he chose something simpler. He chose silence. He looked at the boy with mild disinterest, then stepped around him as if he weren't there. The fifth year caught his sleeve. Harry's hand moved faster than thought. His fingers wrapped around the older boy's wrist and twisted just enough to make pain bloom. Not enough to break. Enough to teach. The boy's breath hitched. Harry leaned in, voice soft. "Don't touch me again." The older boy stared, shocked. Then he nodded stiffly. Harry released him and entered the common room. as if nothing had happened. Draco watched from near the fireplace, eyes bright with delight. Pansy's smile widened, as if she'd just seen the beginning of a story she wanted to repeat. Blaze's gaze sharpened, thoughtful. Harry sat down, unbothered. He knew what they'd all learned. He wasn't a boy you tested twice. Weeks passed. Lessons, meals, whispers, the slow turning of the castle's life around him. Gryffindors noticed him more than he liked, not because they recognized him, but because Harry Black became a point of interest, quiet, controlled, talented, mysterious. Ron Weasley stared at him whenever their paths crossed, as if he felt something wrong in the air and couldn't name it. Hermione Granger watched him like she watched everything. Analytical, curious, eyes always hunting for patterns. Harry didn't mind Hermione as much as he should have. She didn't offer kindness as a leash. She offered observation as a blade. It was familiar. He avoided her anyway, because Hermione was the kind of person who could pull on one thread and unravel an entire lie. Then came Halloween. The troll incident happened the way it always happened in stories Hogwarts liked to tell itself. Chaos, fear, teachers shouting, students running. The corridors filled with noise and panic. Harry didn't run. He watched. He stood at the edge of the Great Hall as prefects herded students toward dormitories, and he watched the professors move like a coordinated unit toward the danger. McGonagall's face was fierce. Flitwick's wand was already out. Snape moved too quickly, like he'd been waiting for an excuse to strike. Harry's scar pulsed once. Not pain, not yet, just awareness. Something else was moving behind the troll, something older and sharper, like a second current beneath the surface of a lake. Harry followed at a distance, not to save anyone, to learn. He slipped through hallways the way he always had, quiet, invisible by posture alone. He didn't need a cloak. People looked past him because he gave them nothing to look at. A shadow, shaped like a child. When he reached the corridor where the troll had been last seen, he found it empty. But the air tasted wrong. Harry tilted his head, listening, and heard it. A faint scrape, heavy footsteps, distant shouting. He moved toward the sound, then stopped when he heard another sound behind it. A whisper, not spoken aloud, not in any language the mouth made. A whisper in the walls, in the stone, in the magic of the castle itself. Harry's scar warmed again. He backed away, choosing not to follow the troll farther, because the troll was obvious. The whisper wasn't. That night, 3 things happened. First, Hermione Granger became a name people would say with respect, because she'd faced a troll and lived. Second, Harry Black became a name people said with quiet fascination, because he'd been seen near the danger and hadn't panicked. Third, Harry began to feel the castle watching him back, not just in the way paintings watched, not just in the way ghosts drifted and stared, in the way the stones seemed to shift under his feet sometimes, as if guiding him towards certain corridors, in the way doors he shouldn't have known about appeared slightly ajar when he passed. Hogwarts had secrets, and those secrets were beginning to notice him. By December, Harry had mapped enough of the castle to know which corridors were used by teachers, which by students, which by no one. He learned Filch's routines. He learned Peeves' routes. He learned which suits of armor were more likely to move at night, and which portraits lied. He also learned something else. Hagrid talked too much when he drank. Harry didn't seek Hagrid out. That would have been obvious. Instead, he positioned himself near the edge of the Great Hall, on a night when the teachers were distracted, and Hagrid had clearly been offered extra mulled mead. Hagrid's voice carried across the room like a friendly disaster. Big dog, yea, no, 3 Eds, like something out of a nightmare. Garden something important, that's all I'll say. and I shouldn't say it, but Harry didn't look at Hagrid. He looked at Snape's face. Because Snape reacted, not with surprise, with irritation. Like Hagrid's stupidity was a known problem, and tonight it was leaking into public view. Three-headed dog, guarding something important. Harry's scar pulsed. He already knew where. The third-floor corridor was warded. The air there felt thicker, like walking into a room where someone had been angry recently. Students avoided it because teachers told them to, and because Hogwarts had trained children to confuse obedience with safety. Harry walked there the next night. He went alone, wand in hand, steps measured. The corridor was quiet. The torches burned lower than usual, flames flickering as if uneasy. Harry moved toward the door at the end, the one with the subtle ward lines stitched into the frame. His scar warmed. He reached for the handle. A growl rolled through the wood, like thunder muffled by distance. Harry paused. He did not flinch. He opened the door. The dog was enormous. Three heads, each with eyes that glinted like wet stones, teeth like knives, breath that stank of raw meat. It filled the room, chained but still dangerous. The moment Harry stepped inside, all three heads turned toward him. Harry held still. The dog's middle head snarled, saliva dripping. Harry looked into its eyes and did the only thing that felt natural. He spoke softly, not English, something else. A hissed syllable shaped by the back of the tongue, instinctive, ancient. The dog froze, one head tilted, then another. Harry didn't know what he'd said. Not exactly. He didn't know if it was Parseltongue, or some other instinct, or simply magic responding to intent. But he knew the result. The dog recognized him as something it didn't want to attack. Harry's scar pulsed again, and for a heartbeat he felt the same wrongness he'd felt in the corridor during the troll incident. A shadow beneath the obvious danger. The dog wasn't the real guard. It was just the first layer. Harry stepped closer. The dog whined, low, confused. Harry looked down. A trapdoor? He didn't open it. Not yet. Because he didn't like moving blindly into unknown depths. Bellatrix had taught him that even bravery was useless without information. He backed away slowly, closed the door, and walked back to the dungeons. That night, he didn't sleep much. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Nyx coiled around his wrist like a living bracelet, and he thought about what Hogwarts was hiding. Something important enough for a three-headed dog. Something important enough to layer protections. Something that made his scar react. He didn't know the name of it yet, but he could feel its pull, like gravity. The next clue came from the library. Harry didn't love books the way Hermione did. Books were tools to him, not comfort. He used them the way Bellatrix used spells, to gain advantage. He found a reference to Nicholas Flamel by accident, hidden in a dusty index that Hermione had clearly been flipping through. It wasn't the name itself that caught his attention. It was the note scribbled beside it in neat, sharp handwriting. Flamel, alchemy, immortality, philosopher's stone, immortality. Harry's scar burned for the first time, a real spike of heat. He hissed softly and closed the book, breathing through the sensation until it dulled. Immortality. If someone at Hogwarts was protecting a philosopher's stone, that meant someone wanted to steal it. And if someone wanted to steal it, that meant the war was not as finished as the world pretended. Harry's mind moved, precise. Who would want immortality? Not Dumbledore. Dumbledore already had power and influence. The stone would be safer locked away than used. Not a student. No first year could even understand the protections. A teacher. Or someone using a teacher. Harry narrowed his possibilities down like a blade. Snape was obvious, too obvious. Snape was hated and feared and blamed for everything. That made him a perfect distraction. Quirrell was nervous. He stuttered. He smelled faintly of something strange, like sweat and foreign incense. He flinched when certain names were spoken. Harry began to watch Quirrell carefully. He didn't stalk. He didn't hover. He simply noticed. Quirrell avoided eye contact. Quirrell kept his hands hidden. Quirrell's smile was always slightly delayed, as if his face needed permission to move. And once, when Quirrell walked too close to Harry in the corridor, Harry's scar burned again. Sharp. Unpleasant. Quirrell flinched too. Harry froze. Quirrell's eyes snapped to his forehead, not to the glamour chain, but as if he could see through it. Then Quirrell hurried away without a word. That night, Harry found the mirror of Erised. He didn't stumble into it like a lost child. He followed the pull. The castle had been guiding him more openly lately. Subtle drafts, doors slightly ajar, staircases that seemed to accidentally position him near forbidden corridors. Harry followed those hints, like a hunter following tracks. He walked through an unused corridor, down a staircase he'd never noticed before, past a tapestry that shifted aside as he approached. Then he reached an empty classroom. Inside, covered in dust, stood a tall mirror with gold frame and strange runes carved along the edges. Harry stepped closer. He looked into it. He expected to see his parents, not because he missed them. He barely knew what missing meant, but because he knew what the world expected him to want. Or perhaps he expected to see himself older, powerful, crowned, feared. Instead, he saw Bellatrix standing behind him, hands on his shoulders, smiling like a queen. And beside her, slightly behind, a shadow with red eyes, not fully formed, not a body, a presence. Harry's stomach twisted. His scar throbbed faintly. He stared at the reflection, trying to remain still, trying to keep his face blank, because the mirror wasn't showing him what he wanted. It was showing him what had been planted in him. He stepped back, and that was when Dumbledore appeared, quietly, softly, as if he'd been waiting. "Ah," Dumbledore said, voice gentle. "I wondered when you might find it." Harry turned slowly. His occlumency walls rose like stone. Dumbledore's smile was kind in the way traps were kind. "It is a curious thing," Dumbledore continued. "This mirror, it shows the deepest desires of our hearts." Harry tilted his head, polite. "And what do you see, Headmaster?" Dumbledore's eyes twinkled. "Socks." Harry nodded as if that was reasonable. Then he lied. "I saw my family," Harry said calmly. Dumbledore's gaze sharpened just slightly. "Yes," Dumbledore murmured. "That is often what children see." Harry held his expression steady, his mind locked tight, not letting Dumbledore see the truth, not letting him see Bellatrix, not letting him see the red-eyed shadow, not letting him see the disgust that had flared in Harry's chest at the idea that part of him might still be chained. Dumbledore stepped closer, and Harry felt the pressure of power, not violent power like Bellatrix's, but heavy power like a mountain deciding whether to move. "You are a black," Dumbledore said lightly, as if commenting on the weather. Harry nodded. "So I'm told." Dumbledore's smile didn't change, but his eyes studied Harry with a careful focus. "And yet," Dumbledore murmured, "there are many things about you that are unusual." Harry's heartbeat stayed steady. "Unusual is relative," he said. Dumbledore chuckled softly. "Indeed, a wise answer." Harry watched him, waiting. Dumbledore's gaze dipped toward Harry's forehead, as if he could see through the glamour with sheer will. Harry felt his scar pulse. he felt something behind it stir. He tightened his mental locks. Dumbledore stepped back, still smiling. "Do be careful with this mirror," he said gently. "It does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live." Harry inclined his head. "Of course." Dumbledore left. Harry waited until he was sure the corridor was empty. Then he turned back to the mirror. He stared at his reflection again. Bellatrix still stood behind him. The shadow still hovered near her, red eyes watching. Harry's mouth tightened. He raised his hand and touched the glass. Cold. His scar burned. He withdrew his hand, turned, and walked out without looking back. He understood then why Bellatrix had warned him. They would try to love him. They would try to claim him. But some chains were older than love. Some chains were built into prophecy, into scars, into stories the world refused to stop telling. Harry returned to the dungeons and sat on his bed, Nyx curling tighter around his wrist, as if sensing his tension. He stared at the stone wall and made a decision. Whatever was under the trapdoor, whatever the stone was, whatever Quirrell was doing, Harry would not let anyone else take control of the situation. Not Dumbledore, not the Ministry, not even Bellatrix, and certainly not the shadow with red eyes that kept trying to appear in his reflection. Because if there was one thing Bellatrix had taught him well, it was this: if you don't choose your destiny, someone else will choose it for you. The first touch of the Dark Lord, and the moment Harry chooses himself, Harry did not tell Draco Malfoy what he'd found. He didn't tell Blaise or Pansy or any of the older Slytherins who would have turned the information into currency. He didn't tell Snape because Snape would ask questions that weren't safe to answer. He didn't tell Hermione because Hermione would try to solve it like a puzzle instead of treating it like a war. Harry kept it to himself. Secrets were safest when they had only one heartbeat. Over the next weeks, he watched Quirrell more closely, but not in the obvious way. He didn't follow him down corridors. He didn't stare in class. He didn't whisper rumors. He simply arranged small collisions, standing near a doorway at the exact moment Quirrell would pass, dropping a quill so Quirrell would have to step around it, choosing a seat that forced Quirrell's gaze to cross his face every time. The same pattern repeated. Quirrell's eyes would flick toward Harry's forehead. The air would tighten. Harry's scar would warm. Then Quirrell would retreat, as if the boy's existence hurt him. Harry started to test it. In defense against the dark arts, when Quirrell spoke about possession, Harry allowed his occlumency walls to loosen a fraction, just enough to see if Quirrell's attention sharpened. It did. Quirrell's voice faltered mid-sentence. His hand jerked. A bead of sweat ran down his temple. Harry tightened his walls again, expression mild, and watched Quirrell recover with a stuttered laugh. So there was something inside Quirrell that reacted to Harry's mind, not just his face. Harry's next test was more dangerous. One night, he slipped out after curfew and returned to the third-floor corridor. The door to Fluffy's room was locked, but the ward lines were familiar now. Harry slid his wand along the frame, murmured a soft counter, and felt the lock click, like a tooth closing. Fluffy's growl rolled through the darkness as Harry stepped inside. The dogs' heads lifted, alert. Harry didn't speak this time. He didn't hiss. He simply held himself steady and let the intent in his mind settle into something calm and dominant. I am not prey. Fluffy sniffed the air. Then the middle head lowered, almost uncertain. Harry moved past the dog and knelt at the trapdoor. There was a keyhole. The wards around it pulsed, layered. Dumbledore's style, Harry realized with a chill. Not theatrical, but absolute. Not cruel, but firm in that self-righteous way that assumed it knew best. Harry touched the wood. His scar throbbed harder than before. He didn't open the trapdoor. He wanted to. The pull was intense, like his bones were being drawn downward. But Bellatrix had taught him the most important rule of all: never walk into a trap you didn't build. He backed away, closed the door, and left. But the decision stayed in him like a thorn. The stone was real. The protections were real. And Quirrell was close. That meant the final moment would come soon. The castle accelerated toward crisis, the way a storm accelerates when pressure changes. Harry felt it in the hallways, the way teachers moved with sharper urgency. He heard it in whispers at the Slytherin table, in older students complaining about increased patrols. He saw it in Snape's posture, tense as a drawn wand. Then came the first real breach. Harry was returning from the library when he heard raised voices near the staff corridor. He stopped in the shadow of a tapestry and listened. Hagrid's booming tone, panicked and apologetic. Snape's cold anger clipped. Quirrell's thin voice nervous. Harry leaned closer, just enough to catch fragments. Don't understand why you'd need. The beast is not the only defense. I was just curious, Professor. Harry's scar burned. Not a warm pulse. A sharp, unpleasant spike that made his vision blur for a second. He pressed his fingers to his forehead, breathing through it, and felt something behind his eyes stir like a creature waking. The pain faded. The whisper remained, a voice that was not his, not Bellatrix's, not any teacher's. A voice like cold smoke. You are close. Harry went very still. He didn't look around. He didn't react. He simply tightened his occlumency walls as hard as he could and forced the whisper behind iron doors. The voice laughed, faint, patient. Harry walked away as if nothing had happened. But his mind raced. That voice wasn't Quirrell's. It wasn't the castle. It was something older, something that recognized him. Harry returned to the common room and sat by the fire with a book open in front of him, pretending to read while his thoughts sharpened into a plan. If the voice could reach him now, it could reach him later. If it could reach him, it could try to take him. And Harry had been raised by Bellatrix Lestrange. He had no intention of becoming anyone's puppet. The crisis finally broke just before exams, when the school's rhythms were tight with stress and distraction. Gryffindors whispered about a plan. Hermione looked exhausted in the corridors. Ron Weasley stormed around like he was preparing for battle. Harry watched them with detached interest. Then, late one evening, he saw it, Professor McGonagall walking fast toward the staff corridor, lips pressed tight. Harry followed at a careful distance. He didn't know what she knew, but he knew she knew something. Teachers didn't move like that, unless disaster had a name. McGonagall vanished into the staff area. A minute later, Quirrell came out. He was alone. His turban looked slightly askew. His face was pale. His hands trembled. Harry's scar burned again. Quirrell moved quickly, glancing over his shoulder as if checking for witnesses. Harry slipped into the shadows and waited. When Quirrell rounded the corner, Harry followed. Not too close. Close enough. Quirrell descended stairs toward the third-floor corridor. Harry's heart remained calm. The plan formed itself naturally. Observe, then decide, then act. Quirrell reached the forbidden door and raised his wand. The wards flared faintly, resisting. Quirrell hissed under his breath, voice changing. Not his stutter. Deeper. Colder. The wards trembled. Harry froze. He recognized the shift. It was the same presence that had whispered in his mind. Quirrell opened the door. Harry moved forward, silent, and slipped inside just as the door shut. Fluffy snarled, all three heads lunging. Quirrell froze, then lifted his wand and spoke again in that deeper voice. The dog hesitated, not calmed, not soothed, controlled by force and fear. Harry watched from the darkness as Quirrell approached the trapdoor. Quirrell's hands shook. He wiped them on his robes, like a man trying to wipe away guilt. Then the deeper voice spoke again, sharper. "Hurry." Quirrell took out a harp. Harry's eyes narrowed. The harp was Hagrid's weakness. Of course, the simplest route was always through the kind. Quirrell plucked a few notes. Fluffy's heads drooped, eyes closing one by one. Quirrell lifted the trapdoor. The air that rose from below was cold and old. Harry's scar screamed, not pain, but presence, like someone pressing their face close to his mind. "Come." Harry clamped his walls down hard enough to make his temples ache. Quirrell climbed down. The trapdoor was left open. Harry stood in the darkness, staring at the hole. This was the moment. He could go to a professor. He could warn Snape. He could warn McGonagall. He could even run to Dumbledore. But he didn't trust any of them, because they would not see him as Harry Black, clever Slytherin boy. They would see him as Harry Potter, prophecy child. They would claim him. So Harry made a choice that felt strange and clean in his chest. He would go down himself, not for heroism, for ownership. He climbed down the ladder. The trapdoor shut above him with a soft thud, sealing him into the underground chambers. The air smelled of damp stone and something sweet, like plant sap. He landed in a room full of devil's snare. The plants moved the moment he dropped, tendrils snaking toward him with hungry intent. Harry didn't panic. He lifted his wand and cast fire. Not wild flames, a controlled burst that made the vines recoil and loosen, smoke curling. He stepped free and moved on. The next chamber held keys that fluttered like trapped birds. Harry didn't chase them. He watched. He noticed one key moved slightly slower, its wing more battered, its metal duller, as if it had been handled recently. He summoned it with a simple charm, caught it cleanly, and left. By the time he reached the chest chamber, he saw the remains of someone else's presence. Footprints, a dropped feather, a faint smear of sweat on stone. Quirrell had already passed. Harry moved through quickly, not wasting time. Then he reached the final chamber, a room with a mirror. The same mirror, arised. Quirrell stood before it, breathing hard, hands shaking. He didn't turn when Harry entered. He was too focused. Harry could hear him murmuring, voice thin, "It's here. I know it's here." Then the deeper voice answered, cold and furious, "Use the boy." Harry's skin went cold. Quirrell's head jerked slightly, as if someone had pulled a string attached to his spine. He turned, and his eyes landed on Harry. Not on Harry's face, on the place where his scar lived beneath the glamour. Quirrell smiled, and it wasn't Quirrell's smile. It was hunger. Harry raised his wand. Quirrell laughed softly. "You shouldn't be here," Quirrell said, but the voice layered, like two people speaking through one mouth. Harry's scar burned. The presence pressed harder against his mind, like fingers searching for a latch. Harry tightened his occlumency, forcing his thoughts into locked corridors. Quirrell took a step forward. "Harry Potter," the layered voice said, savoring the name like a threat. At last. Harry's stomach tightened, but his face stayed calm. He smiled, small and controlled. "You're late," he said. Quirrell's smile widened. "Take off your chain," the voice commanded softly. "Let me see you." Harry didn't move. "Who are you?" Harry asked, voice steady. Quirrell's hands lifted toward his turban, trembling. "You know," the voice hissed. "You have always known." The scar remembers. Harry's scar throbbed in agreement, like a parasite celebrating recognition. Quirrell untied the turban, and the back of his head turned toward Harry. A face emerged where no face should be, white, flattened, unnatural, red eyes gleaming like coals. Harry's breath caught for the first time, not because he was afraid, because the presence in his scar surged toward the presence in the room like magnets snapping together. The pressure in Harry's mind became unbearable. His occlumency walls shuddered. The red-eyed face smiled. "There you are," Voldemort whispered. The name landed like poison. Harry's hand tightened around his wand. Voldemort's eyes glittered. "You were meant to be mine." Harry heard another laugh in his memory, bright and mad. Bellatrix. He felt the shape of her devotion like a shadow behind him. He understood then what this was. Not fate. Not destiny. A struggle for ownership. Voldemort wanted him as a symbol, as a tool, as proof that the world would bend. Bellatrix wanted him as revenge and replacement, a living answer to loss. Dumbledore wanted him as hope and sacrifice, a boy shaped into a weapon for the light. Everyone wanted him. No one had ever asked what he wanted. Harry's smile faded. He looked into Voldemort's eyes and made a decision that felt like cutting his own chains with a blade. "I'm not yours," he said quietly. Voldemort's face twisted, anger flaring. "You will be," Voldemort hissed. "You cannot escape what you are." The pressure slammed into Harry's mind, legilimency like a storm surge, trying to pry open his locked doors. Harry staggered. His vision blurred. He felt the presence in his scar stir, eager like a dog hearing its master's whistle. And for a heartbeat, he felt a terrifying, sickening thing. He felt the temptation to obey. Not because Voldemort was persuasive, because the scar carried something that wanted to return. Harry's hands shook. Then Nyx, curled under his sleeve, bit his wrist. Sharp, real pain. Harry inhaled hard, and the pain anchored him to himself. He slammed his occlumency walls shut with all the force he had, locking down every corridor, every memory, every weakness. Voldemort snarled. Quirrell lurched forward, reaching. "Give me the stone," Voldemort hissed. "Look into the mirror and give it to me." Harry glanced at Erised. He understood the trap immediately. The mirror didn't reward greed. It rewarded desire without intention to use. Quirrell couldn't get the stone because he wanted it for Voldemort. Voldemort couldn't get it because he wanted it for himself. Harry stared at his reflection. What did he want? Not glory, not immortality, not his parents, not even revenge. He wanted something simpler, more brutal. He wanted to belong to no one. He wanted freedom from every hand reaching for his throat. He stepped forward, eyes fixed on the mirror. He let that desire fill him, pure and absolute. Not to take the stone and use it, to take it and deny it, to keep it out of every grasp. The mirror shimmered. Harry felt a cold weight slide into his pocket. The stone. Quirrell gasped, seeing Harry's change. Voldemort screamed in fury. "Give it to me." Harry stepped back, wand raised. Quirrell lunged. Harry didn't think. He acted. A shield charm snapped into place, hard enough to knock Quirrell backward. Quirrell crashed into the mirror with a crack of glass. Voldemort shrieked, voice raw. Harry's scar burned like fire. Then Quirrell's hand shot out, grabbing Harry's wrist. The moment skin touched skin, something ancient surged. Lily's protection, buried beneath glamour and lies, flared awake. Quirrell screamed. His fingers blistered. Smoke rose from his skin. Harry froze, startled by the sudden power. Voldemort screamed louder. "Let go," Harry whispered. Quirrell didn't. His grip tightened. Harry felt the protection surge again, burning Quirrell's flesh like acid. Quirrell collapsed, sobbing. Harry stumbled back, breathing hard, staring at his own hands. He hadn't cast that. He hadn't controlled that. That was not Bellatrix's training. That was his mother's death. The room shook. Harry heard footsteps above, distant shouts, the sound of the trapdoor being forced open. Teachers. They were coming. Dumbledore would arrive. And if Dumbledore arrived while Harry held the stone, everything would change. Harry's mind snapped into motion. He had seconds. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the stone. It was smaller than he expected. Bright, impossibly red, humming, with quiet power. Harry stared at it. Immortality in his palm. A prize that could change the world. He didn't want it. He wanted what it represented. The ability to deny everyone else. But he also understood a deeper truth. If he kept it, he would be hunted forever. If he gave it to Dumbledore, he would be claimed. If he destroyed it, he might unleash consequences he couldn't predict. Footsteps thundered closer. Harry made a choice that felt like strategy and desperation combined. He shoved the stone back into his pocket and ran. Not toward the exit, towards the side passage he had noticed earlier. Half hidden, a crack in the wall that had felt like the castle itself had made room for him. He pressed his hand against the stone. The wall shifted. A narrow tunnel opened. Harry slipped through, as voices filled the chamber behind him. Dumbledore's voice rose, calm but urgent. Harry? Harry ran through darkness, heart pounding, scar burning, stone heavy in his pocket like a beating heart. And for the first time in his life, he was truly alone. No Bellatrix behind him, no teachers in front of him, no one holding the leash. Only the stone, only the scar, only the choice he'd just made. He didn't know yet what it would cost. He only knew one thing for certain. He had taken the first step towards owning himself. The boy who vanished, and the bargain Dumbledore never expected Harry, ran until the tunnel stopped being a tunnel and became a throat. The stone walls narrowed, the air grew colder, and the darkness thickened until it felt like something physical pressing against his eyes. He kept his wand out, but he didn't cast light. Light was a declaration. Light told the world where you were. Bellatrix had taught him that darkness was not absence. It was cover. The passage twisted in a way that didn't match the castle's architecture. Hogwarts was old, but it was still a structure built by hands. This tunnel felt like it had been grown, like it belonged to something beneath the castle rather than inside it. Harry's scar burned in pulses now, not constant, like a heartbeat out of rhythm. Every time it flared, it was as if something behind it turned its face toward him and tried to remember how to speak. He tightened his occlumency walls and ran anyway. The stone bounced against his ribs through his pocket, heavy and warm, like it didn't want to be carried by a child, like it knew it belonged in vaults and legends and adult hands. Harry gritted his teeth. Nothing belonged to anyone who couldn't keep it. The passage ended abruptly in a small chamber with a single door, made of iron and runes. The door was sealed, not with a lock, but with an intent ward. It did not care about keys. It cared about who you were. Harry pressed his palm to the metal. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the runes flared. The door creaked open, as if the castle itself had exhaled. Harry stepped through and emerged into an abandoned corridor he'd never seen before, lined with dusty suits of armor and paintings that had been asleep for centuries. The air smelled stale. Untouched, he closed the door behind him and listened. No footsteps, no shouting, no teachers. But that didn't mean he was safe. It meant he was temporarily unseen. He moved fast, slipping through side corridors, down staircases, past sleeping portraits. He avoided the main routes. He avoided the places where patrols would naturally run. He aimed for the dungeons, for Slytherin territory, because home ground mattered even when home was a lie. Then the castle shifted. Not the staircases, not the usual tricks, something deeper. A pressure in the air that made Harry slow, because it felt like a presence had just stepped onto the board. He knew that presence without seeing it. Dumbledore. Not because Harry had studied him, but because Bellatrix had warned him about people like Dumbledore, men who smiled like kindness and moved like inevitability. Men who didn't need to shout because the world already leaned towards their will. Harry's instincts screamed at him to keep running, but his mind, colder and more strategic, told him something else. If Dumbledore had already discovered the tunnel, Harry would be cornered. If Dumbledore hadn't, Harry could vanish into his dorm and pretend nothing happened. But the stone in his pocket would still be a problem. It would be searched for. It would be hunted. It would be a weight that made every day unstable. There was only one clean move. Not surrender. A bargain. Harry changed direction and moved upward, not toward crowded hallways, but toward the edge of the castle, where unused classrooms sat like forgotten organs. He found one with a broken lock and slipped inside. The room was bare except for desks stacked along the walls and a large window that looked out over the grounds. The moonlight painted the floor in pale lines. Harry went to the center of the room and waited, not like prey, like someone who had chosen the meeting place. A minute passed. Then the air shifted. The door opened without a sound. Dumbledore entered. He looked exactly like the stories said he would. Long silver beard, robes, half-moon glasses, eyes that seemed too gentle for the shape of his power. But Harry noticed the details the stories didn't mention. The way Dumbledore's wand hand was relaxed, but ready. The way his gaze swept the room before it settled on Harry, as if he'd already mapped every escape route. The way his expression did not show surprise at finding a first year alone in a sealed corridor at midnight. Dumbledore had expected to find him. Harry stood still, wand lowered but not put away. Dumbledore's voice was quiet. Harry. Harry didn't flinch at the name. He didn't correct him. Correcting would be weakness. He let the silence stretch until Dumbledore felt it. Then Harry spoke. "You're good," he said calmly. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled faintly, but the twinkle didn't reach the weight underneath. "So are you," Dumbledore replied. "You have caused quite a disturbance." Harry's scar pulsed, and Harry tightened his mind around it, forcing it down. "Quirrell?" Harry asked. Dumbledore's gaze sharpened. "You saw him?" Harry nodded once. "And you saw what was with him," Dumbledore said softly. Harry held his expression steady. Occlumency, walls firm. He did not let Voldemort's face surface in his mind, where Dumbledore could catch even a glimpse. "I saw enough," Harry said. Dumbledore took one step closer. "Where is the stone, Harry?" Harry did not reach for his pocket. He did not glance down. He didn't do anything that would confirm it. Instead, he tilted his head, as if considering a school question. "Why do you want it?" he asked. Dumbledore's smile was gentle. "To keep it safe." Harry's mouth curved faintly. "From who?" Dumbledore's eyes held Harry's for a long moment. "From anyone who would misuse it." Harry let the silence sit between them like a blade on a table. Then he said, "That includes you." It wasn't an accusation delivered with anger. It was a statement delivered with calm. That calm made it sharper. Dumbledore's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "You are very young to speak so boldly." Harry didn't move. "I'm very young to be hunted for a stone I didn't ask to find," Harry said. And yet. Dumbledore's gaze flicked again toward Harry's forehead. You are in danger, Dumbledore said, voice softer. Harry's scar pulsed. Harry's mind tightened. I know, Harry replied. Dumbledore's tone changed slightly. Less warmth, more honesty. Who taught you to build walls in your mind like that? Harry kept his face blank. If you already know my name, he said, you already know you won't like the answer. Dumbledore inhaled slowly. It is possible, he said, that you have been harmed. Harry almost laughed. Harmed was such a small word. Dumbledore stepped closer again, stopping just far enough away that it couldn't be called an intimidation, but was clearly meant to be pressure. I can help you, Dumbledore said. Whatever has happened to you, whatever has been done, Harry's voice cut in, calm and surgical. No one has helped me yet. Silence. Dumbledore's eyes softened, and for a moment there was something real in his face. Regret, perhaps, or a careful imitation of regret. Harry didn't trust it. Trust was something Bellatrix had beaten out of him in pieces. But Harry also understood leverage, and he had it. He reached into his pocket slowly and pulled out the Philosopher's Stone. Dumbledore's gaze locked onto it instantly. Not greedy, but intensely aware. Like a general seeing a weapon return to the battlefield, Harry held it up between them. Here's the problem, Harry said quietly. If I give you this, you will claim me. Dumbledore's eyes flickered. I have no desire to claim you. Harry's smile sharpened. That's exactly what someone who wants to claim me would say. Dumbledore didn't respond immediately. Harry continued, voice steady. If I keep it, I will be hunted by everything that wants it. And I'm already being hunted by things that want me. Dumbledore's gaze grew heavy. You should not have to carry this. Harry's eyes did not soften. I carried worse before I knew what carrying was. Dumbledore's face tightened. Harry lifted a hand slightly, not to silence him like a child silencing an adult, but like a negotiator establishing terms. I will give you the stone, Harry said, but not for free. Dumbledore's eyebrows rose a fraction. What do you want? Harry didn't answer immediately, because he needed to make sure the words were clean, precise. If he made the wrong request, he would place his neck inside Dumbledore's hands willingly. He chose something that sounded reasonable, and was actually a cage with the door in his control. I want privacy, Harry said. No tests, no healers, no ministry interviews, no Order of the Phoenix visitors. No being paraded, no being told who I am. Dumbledore's eyes sharpened. That is an unusual request from a child. Harry's gaze was flat. It's an unusual life. Dumbledore considered him for a long moment. The room felt colder with the weight of that consideration. You are asking me to lie, Dumbledore said quietly. Harry shrugged slightly. I'm asking you to protect me from the people who would tear me apart to understand me. Dumbledore's voice softened. And from the people who took you. Harry didn't react. If Dumbledore knew, he would keep pressing. So Harry shifted the angle. And I want something else, he added. Dumbledore's eyes flicked back to the stone in Harry's hand. Yes, Harry's voice stayed calm. I want you to treat me like a student, not a prophecy. Dumbledore's expression changed again, something like genuine pain flickering across his face. That may be more difficult than you think, Dumbledore said. Harry's smile was faint. Then practice. Dumbledore exhaled slowly. You are clever, he said. Harry didn't deny it. Dumbledore held out his hand. Harry looked at it. Then In a move that would have made Bellatrix laugh with delight, he did not hand the stone over immediately. He said, "Swear it." Dumbledore's eyes sharpened. "Swear." Harry's tone didn't change. "On magic," he said. "On a vow." Dumbledore's gaze held his for a long moment. "A vow is not something to demand lightly," Dumbledore said. Harry's eyes were steady. "Neither is childhood." For a moment, Dumbledore looked older than the legend, not because of wrinkles, because something in him seemed to weigh the cost of this conversation. Then he nodded. "Very well," Dumbledore said softly. "I will not involve the Ministry regarding you. I will not subject you to examinations without your consent. I will not reveal what I suspect about your identity unless you choose to reveal it yourself. And I will treat you, as best I am able, as a student under my protection." Harry listened carefully, measuring the gaps. "That last part is vague," Harry said. Dumbledore's mouth twitched, almost amused. "It must be," he replied. "Protection is sometimes an action, not a sentence." Harry held the stone a heartbeat longer, then finally placed it into Dumbledore's outstretched hand. The moment their fingers brushed, Harry felt it. Not the burning protection this time. Something else. A flash of recognition, like two spells tasting each other's signatures. Dumbledore's eyes widened slightly, and Harry knew Dumbledore had felt it too. Dumbledore closed his hand around the stone. "Thank you," Dumbledore said quietly. Harry's answer was immediate. "I didn't do it for you." Dumbledore nodded, as if he respected that. Then his gaze went again to Harry's forehead. "Your scar," Dumbledore said softly. "It hurt tonight." Harry's scar pulsed, as if mocking the question. Harry did not answer directly. "It doesn't matter," he said. Dumbledore's voice grew gentler, almost a whisper. "It does matter." Harry's eyes were cold. "To you," he said. "Because it's a clue, because it's a piece of your war." Dumbledore's expression tightened. "You are not responsible for our war," Dumbledore said. Harry almost laughed again. "No," he said. "I'm just the battlefield." Dumbledore stared at him for a moment, then looked away as if he could not hold the truth too long without it cutting him. "There is one more thing," Dumbledore said, turning back. Harry's muscles tightened. Dumbledore's voice was quiet, careful. "Someone has been keeping you hidden." Harry said nothing. Dumbledore continued. "I do not know who," he said, and it was a lie. "Not fully, but partly. But whoever it is, they will not be pleased that you have interfered tonight." Harry's mind flicked instantly to Bellatrix. He pictured her smile, her laughter, her possessive pride. He pictured what she would do if she learned Harry had given the stone to Dumbledore. Not out of loyalty to Voldemort, out of rage that Harry had acted without her permission. Harry kept his face neutral. "I didn't ask for their pleasure," he said. Dumbledore studied him. "No," he said softly. "I suspect you did not." The room fell silent again. Then Dumbledore raised his wand. "Sleep," he said gently, not as a command, but as an offer. A soft wave of magic rolled through the room, warm and heavy. Harry resisted it automatically, occlumency snapping up, but he felt his body sag with exhaustion anyway. He'd been running, thinking, fighting, bargaining for hours. Dumbledore watched him sway. "You may go," Dumbledore said. "I will ensure no one troubles you tonight." Harry steadied himself. He didn't thank Dumbledore. Thanks implied debt. He simply nodded once and walked to the door. As his hand touched the handle, Dumbledore spoke behind him. "Harry." Harry paused without turning. Dumbledore's voice was very soft. "You are not alone." Harry's fingers tightened around the handle. He didn't answer, because the statement was both true and false in ways that made it dangerous. He opened the door and stepped into the corridor. He walked back to the Slytherin dormitories with his mind already moving. He had given up the stone, but he'd gained something else. Time. Time under Dumbledore's promise, however imperfect. Time to build his own network. Time to find out how Quirrell had been used, how Voldemort had survived, and why the scar whispered. Time to prepare for the moment Bellatrix inevitably came looking for her investment. When Harry reached his bed, Nyx slid out from under his sleeve and coiled around his wrist, as if reminding him of pain and reality. Harry stared at the ceiling and listened to the dormitory breathe. He didn't feel victory. He felt the first real shape of freedom. Not freedom as comfort, freedom as responsibility. And far away, behind wards and hidden doors, a woman with wild eyes and a devout smile sat by a fire and felt a thread in her web twitch. Bellatrix Lestrange did not know what had happened. Not yet. But she would. And when she did, she would come. Bellatrix felt it 3 days after the stone incident. Not because the dark mark warned her, not because an owl carried gossip fast enough to reach her hidden rooms, but because the magic she had placed on Harry since infancy twitched like a nerve. It was not a tracking charm, not in the simple way auras used them. It was subtler, older, a braided thread of intention woven into the seams of his clothes, the chain that hid his scar, the wards she had wrapped around his name when she taught him to speak. A claim, a reminder, a leash that could tug back if the dog ran too far. That leash, when taut. Bellatrix sat up in her chair by the fire and smiled as if someone had whispered a delicious secret in her ear. He moved, she murmured. The room around her was quiet. Not Grimmauld Place this time, but a safer nest, a rented manor, whose owners had vanished weeks before, under spells that would unravel their memories into comfortable lies. Bellatrix did not live in one place long enough for the world to pin her down. That was how you survived when half the wizarding world wanted you dead, and the other half wanted you useful. She touched her forearm, where the dark mark still burned with stubborn strength. It hadn't faded when Voldemort fell. Bellatrix had taken that as proof that he wasn't truly gone. Now, she took it as proof of something else, too. If the mark still lived, then the bond still existed. And if Harry's thread had pulled tight, then Harry had done something without her. Bellatrix laughed softly, almost affectionate. "My clever boy," she whispered. "You're growing teeth." Her first impulse was to apparate to Hogwarts immediately, tear the castle apart, drag him back by the collar, and praise him for defiance, while punishing him for disobedience. Love and violence had always been tangled together in her mind. She did not separate them neatly. But Bellatrix wasn't only mad. She was patient when patience served her. She needed to know what had happened. She needed to know who had touched him. She needed to know if the castle had tried to claim her prize. So she did what she always did before striking. She listened. The wizarding world, even when it pretended to be civilized, was built on gossip. Gossip was the true currency. Gossip was the bloodstream beneath the ministry's robes. Bellatrix went to Nocturne Alley, not in a hood and hunched posture like a coward, in a glamour that made her look like a bored, wealthy witch with dull hair and a forgettable face. People looked away instinctively, not noticing the predator beneath the disguise. She stepped into a shop that sold cursed objects behind a velvet curtain and sat with a man who owed her a favor. "Tell me what the school is whispering," she said. The man swallowed hard. "Hogwarts?" Bellatrix's smile was gentle, in the way poison could be gentle. "Yes." He hesitated. Bellatrix tilted her head. He spoke quickly after that. Something happened under the school. Teachers were running about. Dumbledore sealed off corridors. There were rumors of you-know-who, but that's just children talking. Most say it was just a break-in. Someone tried to steal something. Bellatrix's eyes gleamed. Something, she repeated softly. The man shrugged helplessly. People say an artifact, an old thing. No one knows. But the headmaster's been quieter. Snape's been furious. Quirrell collapsed, I heard. Taken away sick. Bellatrix felt her pulse quicken. Quirrell had always been weak. Weak men were useful because they were easy to steer. But if Quirrell collapsed, that meant the thing steering him had been forced back, which meant someone had intervened. Someone small enough to slip through protections. Someone clever enough to survive. Bellatrix leaned forward. And the students? She asked. Any names? The man frowned. There's talk of a new first year. A black boy. Quiet. Talented. Odd. Bellatrix's smile widened, bright and feral. Odd, she echoed, savoring it. The man shivered. Bellatrix stood, leaving a coin on the table that was worth more than the information. She didn't need more gossip. She had confirmation. Harry had acted. Harry had been seen. Harry was beginning to become a story. And stories were dangerous because they invited hunters. Bellatrix returned to her manor and began preparing. Not like a mother preparing to visit a school, like a commander preparing to infiltrate enemy territory. She took potions for concealment. She chose a wand with a signature that could not be traced to her. She layered glamours upon glamours until even a skilled aura would struggle to peel them back. She dressed in the robes of a respectable witch, grey and plain, and pinned her hair into a modest bun. Then she laughed at her reflection. I look like a professor, she whispered, delighted. She didn't apparate directly to Hogwarts. Too risky, too obvious. Instead, she traveled by hidden routes, ancient fireplaces in forgotten houses, tunnels that only certain families knew about, stepping stones of old magic that bypassed ministry monitoring. By the time she reached Hogsmeade, she was already inside the world's blind spot. The village was cheerful under winter's edge, lights glowing in windows, students running with scarves and laughter. Bellatrix watched them with contempt. Then she walked into the Three Broomsticks as if she belonged. Madame Rosmerta smiled at her in polite greeting, not recognizing the predator beneath the glamour. Bellatrix ordered a drink and listened. Students talked too loudly. That was their flaw. She heard more in 10 minutes than the ministry could have gathered in a week. Quirrell fainted. Dumbledore was there. It was Harry Black, I swear. He was near the corridor. Slytherin boy, yeah, the quiet one. Bellatrix's eyes gleamed. Harry Black. That name was hers. It was a mask she'd given him. Now the world was beginning to believe in it. Good. Bellatrix finished her drink and left, moving through the snow with silent purpose. She did not need to enter the castle as a parent. She needed to enter it as something the castle accepted. Hogwarts accepted many things. Teachers, ghosts, letters, owls. It also accepted inevitabilities. Bellatrix chose the simplest route. She became a ministry inspector, not permanently, just long enough to pass through the front gates with papers and authority, and the kind of polite arrogance that made people step aside without thinking. The ministry loved sending inspectors to Hogwarts. It was one of their favorite ways to pretend they controlled anything. Bellatrix forged documents so cleanly even a goblin might have admired the craftsmanship. By late afternoon, she stood in the entrance hall, boots clicking against stone, eyes scanning the familiar grandeur. The castle felt different than she remembered. It hummed with protection, yes, but there was something else too, a tension in the wards, like the place had recently absorbed violence and hadn't fully settled. Bellatrix smiled. A teacher spotted her and approached. flustered. "Can I help you?" the witch asked. Bellatrix offered a practiced ministry smile. "Inspection," she said smoothly, holding out her papers. The witch blanched and hurried away to fetch McGonagall. Bellatrix waited, gaze drifting across the hall. Then she felt it again. The thread, not pulling now, but present, vibrating faintly, like a string plucked in the distance. Harry was in the castle. She followed the sensation like a compass. McGonagall arrived, stern and composed. But Bellatrix saw the tension beneath it. McGonagall's eyes moved constantly, assessing threads. "Madam?" McGonagall said, reading the forged name. Bellatrix nodded. "Pleasant. I won't take too much of your time. Routine. A few questions. A walk around. The usual." McGonagall's lips thinned. "Hogwarts has nothing to hide." Bellatrix's smile almost widened too far. "Oh, of course," she said. "It's only that there was an incident recently." McGonagall's gaze sharpened. Bellatrix leaned in slightly, as if confidential. "The Ministry is concerned," she murmured. McGonagall's jaw tightened. "The Ministry has no right to interfere." Bellatrix lifted a hand, calming. "I'm not here to interfere," she lied sweetly. "Just to observe." McGonagall reluctantly led her through corridors. Bellatrix looked at everything while appearing to look at nothing. She noted patrol routes. She noted ward lines. She noted which portraits watched visitors too closely. She also noted something that made her almost laugh aloud. The castle itself resisted her, not in an obvious way, not with alarms, but the stairs shifted subtly to inconvenience her. Doors took longer to open. Portraits seemed to glance away rather than offer directions. Hogwarts did not like her. That, Bellatrix thought, was almost flattering. After half an hour of pretending to care about safety protocols, Bellatrix made her move. "I'd like to observe a few classes," she said lightly. McGonagall frowned. "Inspectors rarely." "The Ministry insists," Bellatrix said, pleasant and firm. McGonagall's displeasure tightened, but she agreed. Bellatrix chose potions, because Snape would be there. And Snape, Bellatrix knew, was a man who lived in shadows and secrets. If anyone in the castle could see through her glamour, it would be him. She wanted to know if he would. The dungeon classroom smelled like bitter herbs and smoke. Students sat in stiff lines. Harry sat near the middle, posture perfect, face blank. Bellatrix's breath caught for the first time in years, not because she was sentimental, because seeing him at distance among other children made something in her chest twist possessively. He looked too controlled for his age, too calm, too composed. He looked exactly like what she'd made. Bellatrix's smile stayed polite as she took a seat at the back, pretending to be an inspector, observing. Snape glanced at her once. His eyes narrowed. He continued teaching, but Bellatrix saw the shift in him, the subtle tension, the way his wand hand moved slightly closer to his sleeve. He suspected. Good. Bellatrix's gaze stayed fixed on Harry. Harry's eyes did not flick toward her, even once. That should have pleased her. Instead, it irritated her. He should have felt her. He should have known she was near. Unless he had learned to hide even from her thread. That possibility sent a cold thrill through her. When class ended, students filed out. Harry gathered his things. Movement smooth and unhurried, Bellatrix stood. She didn't follow him immediately. That would be obvious. She waited until he reached the corridor, until the stream of students thinned. Then she moved. She caught him near a turn, where the walls narrowed, and there were no portraits nearby. "Harry," she said softly. He stopped. Slowly, he turned. His eyes landed on her face. Green. steady, unreadable. For a heartbeat, Bellatrix saw the child she'd stolen, the baby in the cot staring up at her like a dare. Then she saw something else. A boy who had learned to dare back. "My name is Harry Black," he said politely. Bellatrix's smile was almost affectionate. "Of course," she purred. "Forgive me. I forget sometimes how many masks you wear." Harry did not blink. "Who are you?" he asked. Bellatrix leaned closer, letting a fraction of her real self bleed through the glamour, just enough to sharpen the air, just enough to make the corridor feel colder. Harry's eyes widened slightly, not with fear, with recognition. He whispered very softly, so softly it barely moved the air. "You." Bellatrix's smile broke wide, delighted. "Yes," she whispered back. "Me." Harry's jaw tightened. "You shouldn't be here." Bellatrix laughed under her breath. "I shouldn't have been in Godric's Hollow either," she murmured. "And yet." Harry's hand twitched toward his wand. Bellatrix's eyes gleamed. "Oh, don't," she said sweetly. "Not here. Not in the corridor. Not where the walls might remember." Harry's voice stayed calm, but something hard lived underneath it. "What do you want?" Bellatrix tilted her head, studying him like a work of art. "I want to see you," she said simply. "I want to know what you did." Harry's expression did not change. "I went to class," he said. Bellatrix smiled. "A lie," she purred. "But a good one. Better than your first lies." Harry stared at her. "What happened to Quirrell?" Bellatrix asked softly, voice sharpening. "Did you see what was inside him?" Harry's scar pulsed under the glamour chain. Bellatrix's eyes flicked toward it with hungry interest. Harry's hand tightened around his bag strap. "I saw," he said carefully. "And?" Bellatrix whispered, leaning in as if the answer was a prayer. Harry looked at her, and in his eyes Bellatrix saw something she hadn't expected. Not devotion, not awe, not the hunger she wanted. A cold assessment. "He's alive," Harry said quietly, "or part of him is. And he wanted the stone." Bellatrix's lips parted, a tremor of joy crossing her face. "And the stone?" she asked. Harry's gaze remained steady. "It's gone," he said. Bellatrix froze. The corridor seemed to tighten. "What do you mean, gone?" she asked, voice still soft, but edged with danger. Harry didn't flinch. "I gave it away," he said. Bellatrix's smile vanished. For the first time since she'd met him, Bellatrix's expression was not playful. It was furious. "To who?" she hissed. Harry held her gaze, and for a heartbeat the corridor felt like a dual circle. Then Harry answered, "Dumbledore." Bellatrix's breath hitched. The fury in her eyes sharpened into something almost holy. "You gave it to him," she whispered, as if tasting betrayal. Harry's voice was flat. "It wasn't yours." Bellatrix's laugh was a broken sound. "You still don't understand," she said softly, stepping closer. "Everything you touch becomes mine, Harry. Everything. That is the rule." Harry's expression didn't change, but his eyes went colder. "No," he said quietly. "That was your rule." Bellatrix's face tightened. Fear entered the corridor. Not Harry's fear. Hers. Just a flicker. Just a crack. Because in that moment, Bellatrix realized something that made her stomach twist. Harry had crossed her without trembling. Harry had made a choice without asking her. Harry had acted like he belonged to himself. Bellatrix's voice became dangerously soft. "You think you can leave me?" she whispered. Harry's answer was calm, almost gentle. "I already did." Silence. Bellatrix stared at him, breathing hard. eyes shining. Then she smiled again. But it was not the playful smile from before. It was the smile of someone who had just met a worthy opponent. "Good," she whispered. "Good. That means you're finally becoming what I wanted." Harry didn't relax. Bellatrix leaned in, close enough that Harry could smell her perfume beneath the glamour, close enough that her voice was a thread against his ear. "Listen to me," she whispered. "Dumbledore will try to keep you. He will try to soften you. He will try to make you his." Harry's eyes stayed steady. Bellatrix's smile sharpened. "And he will fail," she said, "because you have me in your bones." Harry's scar pulsed hot. Bellatrix stepped back, glamour tightening again, her expression smoothing into the polite inspector mask. "I will be watching," she said lightly, as if commenting on homework, "and I will come again." Then she turned and walked away down the corridor, leaving Harry standing in the cold. Harry didn't move until she was gone. Only then did he exhale, because now he understood something he hadn't fully grasped before. He had faced Voldemort's presence and survived. He had bargained with Dumbledore and walked away. But Bellatrix Lestrange was different. She didn't want him dead. She wanted him close. And that kind of threat was harder to fight. Bellatrix's visit didn't become a headline. It didn't become a rumor either, not in any clear form, because Bellatrix was careful and Harry was smarter than the people who loved gossip. But it became a shift. After that day, Hogwarts didn't feel like a school. It felt like a board with invisible hands moving pieces. Harry felt the pressure in small ways first. Snape watched him harder, no longer content with distance. He lingered after class, eyes narrowed, as if trying to decide whether Harry was a threat, a victim, or a weapon he could redirect. McGonagall's stern concern sharpened, her gaze tracking Harry whenever danger brushed close. Flitwick began giving Harry extra challenges, perhaps trying to anchor him in something simple like achievement. Dumbledore did something subtler. He stopped summoning Harry. He stopped making obvious moves. Instead, he watched. It was the worst kind of attention, because Dumbledore's patience was not kindness. It was strategy. Harry responded, the only way he knew how. He built his own board. The first piece was Slytherin, not the house as a whole, not the tradition, not the green banners, the people, the structure underneath the structure. Draco Malfoy was easy to influence, because Draco wanted to be led by someone who looked like him and spoke like him. Draco wanted an older brother shaped like a prophecy. Confident, sharp, destined. Harry gave Draco just enough. A quiet correction here. A small compliment there. A shared secret about a teacher's weakness. Draco began orbiting Harry without realizing he'd changed his center. Pansy was different. Pansy wanted power through proximity. She wanted to stand near whoever seemed inevitable. Harry didn't offer her affection. He offered her utility. He let her spread selective rumors that benefited him. He let her believe she was helping him, which meant she would help him more. Blaise was the hardest. Blaise didn't crave belonging. Blaise craved advantage. He didn't trust loyalty or affection. He trusted outcomes. So Harry didn't try to win Blaise with charm. He won Blaise with proof. One evening, in the common room when older Slytherins were discussing ministry raids and the new political order, Harry listened quietly until someone said, with careless arrogance, that the Dark Lord was finished and anyone still loyal was a fool. Harry didn't argue. He simply asked softly, "If he's finished, why are the wards at Hogwarts thicker this year?" The room stilled. Blaise's eyes sharpened. Harry continued calmly, "If the war is over, why is Snape watching the corridors at night? Why does Dumbledore keep something locked in a hidden room? Why did Quirrell collapse and leave without explanation? No one answered. Harry didn't press. He let the questions hang like smoke. Later that night, Blaise sat beside him and asked quietly, "What do you know?" Harry looked at him and replied with controlled honesty, "I know the world lies," he said, "and I know people who believe the lie die faster." Blaise studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. From that point on, Blaise didn't become loyal. He became aligned. That was enough. The second piece was information. Harry began to collect it, like other boys collected chocolate frog cards. He listened to older students, to portraits, to house elves muttering in corners, to the way professors' voices changed when they thought no children were near. He learned that the ministry was already tightening control again, emboldened by the idea that Voldemort was gone, and they could shape the narrative now. He learned that families who had once served the Dark Lord were quietly buying their way back into influence. He learned that the Malfoys were polishing themselves into respectable society with the patience of people who had always known they would survive. He also learned that Dumbledore was meeting with certain teachers late at night, and that Snape was not always present for those meetings. That absence mattered. The third piece was himself. Harry's scar did not stop whispering. It didn't speak in words every day. Sometimes it was only pressure. Sometimes it was heat. Sometimes it was a faint sense of direction, like it wanted him to turn his head towards something he shouldn't see. And sometimes, in the quiet moments before sleep, when the dormitory was still, and Nyx curled against his wrist, Harry would hear it clearly. Not Voldemort's voice the way it had sounded through Quirrell. Something more fractured. Something that sounded like a memory trying to reassemble. "You are mine." Harry would tighten his occlumency walls until his temples ached and whisper back inside his own skull, "No." But the truth was uglier than defiance. The scar wasn't just a mark. It was a link. And links could be used both ways. Harry realized that one night, when he was studying alone in an empty classroom, and the candle flame flickered in a way that didn't match any draft, he looked up and felt it. A presence brushing the edge of his mind, like fingers along a locked door. Not trying to smash through the way it had in the mirror chamber. Testing, learning, waiting. Harry closed his eyes, breathing slowly, and instead of tightening his walls, he did something Bellatrix had never taught him to do. He opened a controlled crack, not enough to invite invasion, enough to listen. The presence immediately pressed closer, hungry. Harry kept the crack small, precise, and felt a rush of images slide toward him, like water through a narrow pipe. A cold room, stone walls, a man kneeling, trembling, offering devotion. A pale face with red eyes turning toward darkness. Then a flash of something else. A forest. A cauldron. A snake's hiss. A plan. Harry snapped the crack shut. His breath came faster. He sat back, heart pounding for the first time in months, because now he knew Voldemort was not only alive, he was preparing, and Voldemort could reach him. But if Voldemort could reach him, Harry could potentially reach Voldemort. That realization didn't comfort Harry. It empowered him. He wasn't the battlefield only. He might be the spy. That winter, Harry began to change. Not in ways that teachers would notice easily. He still did well in class. He still kept his posture controlled. He still spoke politely. He still wore the mask of Harry Black, quiet Slytherin boy. But inside, he started building something larger. A philosophy. Bellatrix had taught him that love was a leash. Dumbledore had tried to show him that love could be protection. Voldemort represented love twisted into worship and fear. A cult that called itself loyalty. Harry looked at all three models and decided they were all versions of the same problem: ownership. Everyone wanted to own something. People, ideas, narratives, immortality. Harry started to see the wizarding world as a structure built on ownership. Bloodlines owned children. The Ministry owned truth. Dumbledore owned hope. Voldemort owned fear. And ownership always led to violence, because ownership created hunger. Harry wondered what a world without ownership would look like. Then he corrected himself. A world without ownership was impossible. So the real question was, who owned what and why? Harry's answer was simple. He would own himself. And if that wasn't enough, he would own the system that tried to own everyone else. The moment his trajectory truly shifted came near the end of first year, after exams, when the castle relaxed into summer laziness. Harry was walking alone near the edge of the forbidden forest, not crossing the boundary, just watching the trees move in the wind. He had always liked forests. They were honest. They didn't pretend they wouldn't kill you. Nyx hissed softly from inside his sleeve. Harry paused. He felt it again. That faint pressure behind his scar, like a hand resting on the back of his neck. He closed his eyes and let the controlled crack open. A voice slid into his mind, clearer than it had ever been. Soon, Harry's stomach tightened. He whispered inside his skull, carefully. Where? The presence hesitated, like it hadn't expected a question. Then it answered, not in words but in sensation, a direction, a pull, the forest. Harry's eyes opened slowly. The forbidden forest was no longer just trees. It was a map, a meeting point, a place where something would happen soon. Harry stood very still, thinking. He could tell Dumbledore. He could bring teachers. He could try to stop whatever was coming. That would be the hero path, the path the world expected from Harry Potter. But Harry wasn't Harry Potter, not in the way they meant it. And the hero path always ended with someone else holding the leash. So Harry chose a different path. He chose preparation. He returned to the Slytherin dormitories and began writing letters. Not to Bellatrix. Never to Bellatrix. To contacts he'd quietly cultivated through Slytherin family networks. To an older cousin of Blaze's who owed him a favor. To a Greengrass aunt who liked careful children. To a Malfoy servant who carried whispers like an owl carried mail. He didn't ask them to do anything illegal. He asked questions. Small ones. Harmless ones. What had the Ministry been doing near forests lately? What artifacts had been moved in secret? What rumors existed about rituals and old magic returning? Information came back slowly, but enough. Enough for Harry to see the outline. Voldemort's people were moving again, and Bellatrix would want to be there when he returned, which meant Bellatrix would come for Harry again, soon, because she would not want Voldemort to return without her prize beside her. Harry stared at the answers he'd gathered and understood the shape of the timeline he had accidentally created. In the original story, Harry Potter was protected by love, guided by friends, pushed by teachers into heroism. In this story, Harry had been raised by obsession, trained by cruelty, and taught to see the world as a game of power. He wasn't becoming Voldemort. He didn't crave worship. He didn't crave blood purity. He didn't even crave immortality. He craved something more frightening to the people who liked simple labels. Control without ideology. He would not kneel to Voldemort, but he also would not be Dumbledore's shining weapon. He would become something the wizarding world had no category for. A Slytherin raised by a Death Eater who decided to build his own order. And as summer approached, as the castle prepared to send children home to families and safety, Harry remained still, planning, because he knew now that the war was not over. It had only been waiting for new players. And when Voldemort finally rose again, he would find a wizarding world ready to fight him. What he would not expect was to find Harry Potter already waiting in the dark, not as prey, not as symbol, not as savior, but as the problem, the kind of problem that didn't choose a side, the kind of problem that chose itself.